Welcome to part two of our week 9 lecture on technology and strategy. We're dealing tonight now turning to the question of options. The goal of this is to introduce the notion and logic behind financial options as a metaphor and as a tool for investigating questions concerning timing in strategic decision making and in questions regarding technology evolution and adoption. The financial option is a powerful concept. A financial option is something that gives you the right, but not the obligation, to make a future purchase at a specified price. Almost all agricultural products, for example, are purchased using options. The reason you use an option is that you never know what the weather is going to happen with the weather. There could be a drought, there could be a flood. To guard against the uncertainty associated with agricultural produce, farmers love to sell their stuff early when the prices look good. On the same time, traders are looking at the future and they don't know whether there will be an abundant crop or a shortage. And so they too want to guard against uncertainty. So they have incentive to purchase an option as an insurance policy against changing market conditions that might move against them. So if you buy 100,000 bushels of corn at a specified price, a dollar, people are willing to sell you an option that'll cost you, in this case, this example would be 5 cents a bushel. Total contract cost is $5,000, and for that $5,000 you get the right to purchase 100,000 bushels at a dollar a bushel. The total cost then is $1.05. The odds that the price will rise above $1.05 increase as the amount of uncertainty about the future of corn prices rises. So volatility is a very important thing. The more volatility, the more potential value lies within the option itself. Volatility meaning the extent to which price might fluctuate. If the volatility is high, the price could be $1.10, or in extreme cases, it could go up to $1.50, $2, in which case the option you purchase could be very, very valuable. So when volatility is high, options are worth more. So it's uncertainty that drives the price of an option. In this case, it's in your interest to purchase the option because if you're wrong, you only lose $5,000. If you're right, anything above $1.05 is pure profit. So what you're doing is buying an insurance policy against changing market conditions. And in a way, what you're doing is locking in an option on the future that will give you greater flexibility. When you think about the option as a metaphor, it really is an important tool in decision making because you can think about it and apply option logic to projects. By applying it to projects, what you're thinking about here is, what information do I need in order to make a more informed, a better decision about investing or undertaking an option and exploring a market, buying a technology. The problem is you don't know what you don't know. Time needs to unfold, and sometimes you just want to put off making a decision from now to a future date, 30 days, 60 days, whatever it might be. If you can put off making a decision, then you can make a better informed decision at a future date. So, and since you don't know what you don't know, in other words, uncertainty is high, by putting that off, you are able to make a more informed decision. And here, information has monetary value. So the option basically is something that gives you added flexibility. So you're spending money to give you time to make a more informed decision. Option thinking can also be used to justify waiting to make a decision if certain events must happen before you know which way to go, right or left. And so what you would do is break down your decision processes and your guidance on what to do next by making a decision date that is at or around the timing of certain events. The value of options is also that it gives you a way of thinking about what your alternative uses for money might be. You can ask questions regarding, if I don't do this, what else might I do? And as we'll see, an options perspective is a tool for exploring questions of that nature. We call them real options because, in contrast to a financial option, which is something that exists in financial markets, and as soon as it comes into existence and disappears, and because it's financial, it's fungible, there's really no strategic investment with it. Real options usually involve a strategic commitment, something that's at least quasi irreversible. It could be irreversible because you're spending money that you can't get back under any conditions. It could be irreversible because if you decide, for example, to try selling your product into a new market, if a competitor responds, you've changed the whole market context, and so you're locked in. So the option itself is not reversible. It's not simply a matter of buying an insurance policy. It's that the future looks different than it did in the past. So that's why we call it real. What we're trying to do then is use options thinking in developing scenarios, different sequences of if-then statements that we can use to cost out different paths toward the future. So we engage in a storytelling process predicated on different sets of assumptions and work through those sets of assumptions, in most cases using a decision tree type logic, in order to figure out what the next how much money it will cost me till I reach the next decision point, and what the financial value of waiting might be. And if I'm able to figure that out correctly, I can then determine whether or not to kill or reinvest, and I can do so in ways that are cheaper than buying the whole thing. The problem with financial approaches to pricing projects, using NPV, internal rates of return, break even, what have you, is all of those assume a project goes from beginning to end. And if you kill it, the money's lost. In options thinking, what we believe is that information has value. And so the value of the option lies in the improvement in the quality of information that becomes available to you. And so we are effectively assigning a financial value, a monetary value, to better informed decision making. So real options thinking is a valuable tool when trying to consider questions about timing. So let's revisit the definition. A financial option gives an owner a right, but not the obligation, to buy or sell a security, a good, a commodity, any object really, at a given price. The analog is that companies that make a strategic investment in a technology or in a strategic course of direction, say the decision to enter a market or to introduce a new product, have the right, but not the obligation, to exploit these opportunities in the future. An example is if you want to go into a new geographic market, you can consider the various forms of strategic alliance that you might use to enter that market at a lower cost than it would if you went into it whole hog. For example, people often form a strategic alliance to gain access to a distribution channel, potentially in a new market. Oftentimes in new geographic markets, especially in developing countries, you often use a joint venture where you partner with a local, and you rely on the skills and expertise of the local to give you more information about what it takes to compete in those markets, and at a future date you can decide whether to reinvest or not. You can think about an initial investment as serving as a platform to extend your scope into related markets. So if you're going for a distribution channel, strategic alliance is a likely venue. Or it could simply be an attempt to sell directly via some low-cost avenue. It could be simple market tests that you do via the internet to try to reach different market segments. It could be simply getting onto a plane and going and talking to people. But those are all can be viewed as investments that you need to reveal information so you can make a better informed decision. If you're thinking about R&D or developing technologies, you can think about the investment into an R&D investment into an internal project as a form of an option. What you're doing there is figuring out if you can learn how to use a particular technology and if it works. Things that you want to do in-house are usually things that are related to your core expertise. On the other hand, there may be things happening in the outside environment that would be difficult for you to keep up with and know about. And so you engage in corporate venture capital. You make an investment in a company that gives you privileged position to sort of watch what's going on. And by virtue of the right of that investment, it allows you to purchase the company at a future date at a lower price. And so you end up with a much better position of understanding what the value of options are. And when we look at it graphically, what happens is you need to understand that the value of an option is greatest when uncertainty is highest, and that means a long time in the future. The closest you get until the date that the product really hits the marketplace, until anybody can buy it. That's the point at which its real market value is determined. The closer you get to that, okay, the more certainty associated with it. So the option itself becomes less valuable to you. And actually, it turns out that the price that you would have to pay in order to lock in some future decision actually increases. So when uncertainty is high, it's of the most potential value to you, but the selling price, the market price of the option is actually pretty cheap, and then it increases over time. So here, think about when you make a decision. What's the smallest piece of information? What's the smallest investment I can make that would get me to a point where I can make a better informed decision? So the way this usually is played out, and there's multiple articles out there, there's books on this, there's book chapters, I don't need to point them out to you, you can find them readily enough. And if you remember statistics, you have decision trees. In this particular case, when you look at the decision tree, you're thinking about the smallest set of actions that'll take you down the road to obtaining better information, and how much does it cost to get you there. And so you do a decision tree, you assign values, you plug in costs, and you can actually figure out a financial value associated with this. But the notion here is always that you're trying to reduce risk. And you reduce risk by answering the questions that you need to make the right, most informed decisions. And if you do that, the assumption is that you can, once you figure that out, you can reduce your cost of getting there, you can improve the probability of payoff. You can sit there and fool around with probabilities all you want. There are people in corporations that are paid a lot of money to fool around with these things. That's not my goal. My goal here is to familiarize you with the notion that building scenarios in your head about what the future might look like is an important way to think and parse through alternatives and the value of different courses of action. Scenario approaches, what I just talked about, again, identify key events, identify choices, costs, benefits, assign probability, and choose the best course of action. The problem you're doing this, of course, always recognize. You're doing this top down. You don't really know what you don't know, so you're assigning probabilities subjectively. And so you're liable for bias and things like that. And, sometimes it might lack validity because, you're not in the best position to make an informed decision. So it becomes risky. The goal all along, what you want to do here is keep on plugging on, building out scenarios, and doing it until the story that you tell resonates, until it seems to have some integrity to you, until you can tell that story in a persuasive manner to an expert. When you've reached that, you're in a position where you can really start to explain and make strategic recommendations to actors, to decision makers in your company.